Hey guy, imagine this steam rising in soft curls, the faint echo of dripping water bouncing off stone walls, and the low hum of a dozen conversations blending into one gentle background murmur. You take a slow step forward, the smooth marble cool under your bare feet, and the air smells faintly of olive oil and damp stone. Welcome to the ancient bathhouse, where the world learned that getting clean could also mean getting connected. Before the modern showerhead and water heaters, before scented soaps and bubble baths, there was a different kind of ritual, a slow, steamy, communal dance of heat, chatter, and the occasional scandal. You're standing now at the threshold of a Roman therme, but don't think of it as just a place to wash. Think of it like the heart of a city, pulsing with warmth, laughter, and gossip. People came here to escape the dust of the streets, to soothe their bodies, to meet friends or rivals, or to simply pretend they had something important to say. The sound of sandals slapping against wet floors, the gentle clatter of cups, the hiss of steam, it all wraps around you like a blanket of time. Let's slow down a bit. Take a breath. The modern world moves to fast 5-minute showers, quick towels, and off to work. But here, in the ancient bathhouse, nobody's rushing. They've got hours to spare. You'd see old men arguing about politics, athletes rubbing oil on their shoulders, poets rehearsing verses to impress someone nearby. Even emperors came down from their marble palaces to sweat with commoners, pretending they were one of the people for an afternoon. It's funny, really, how much of civilization's heartbeats echoed through these humid rooms. You might think bathing was just about hygiene, but it was more than that. It was performance, ritual, and even diplomacy. The warm air carried secrets. The water washed away not just dirt, but also distance between people, and sometimes that closeness turned into trouble. Let's go back a little further, before Rome even existed. Before these walls rose from the ground, the idea of communal bathing started in ancient Greece. Greeks believed cleanliness was next to godliness, long before that phrase ever existed. They bathed after athletic games, not to remove sweat, but to honor the body. To them, the body was a reflection of balance and beauty, a small echo of the god's perfection. So when they washed, they were almost praying. Their baths were simple stone basins, cold pools, sometimes just running water pouring from a spout carved like a lion's mouth. But even then, it wasn't a private act. Bathing was done together, with laughter, conversation, and the casual comfort of being human. Now, when the Romans arrived centuries later, they looked at that Greek idea and thought, let's make it bigger. Typical Romans, they never did anything halfway. What the Greeks saw as sacred simplicity, the Romans turned into architectural theater. They created vast, echoing chambers with vaulted ceilings that caught the light and scattered it like liquid gold. Beneath your feet, an invisible furnace called a hypocaust hummed gently, sending heat through stone floors and hollow walls. The result was a miracle of engineering. The entire building became a living, breathing machine of warmth. You walk through it now. The entrance opens into a changing hall, where people leave their clothes in niches along the wall. Slaves move quietly, collecting baskets, folding towels. The air is warmer here, but not yet hot. It teases you with what's coming. Through a low archway, you step into the tepidarium, a room of perfect comfort. The temperature cradles your skin like a soft hand. In one corner, a man hums as he scrapes oil and dirt from his arm with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. The sound is rhythmic: scratch, rinse, splash, sigh. It's almost hypnotic. In the next room, the heat hits harder. This is the caldarium, the hot chamber. The floor is nearly too warm to stand still, and the steam wraps around you so thickly you can barely see shapes moving through it. Someone laughs. Someone else groans with pleasure as the heat loosens his muscles. The smell of eucalyptus oil and smoke lingers faintly, mixed with human warmth. There's water here, hot pools sunk into the marble, their edges smooth and worn from years of bodies lowering into them. You dip your fingers in and feel that instant pulse of comfort that only hot water brings. It's the same feeling people chase today in spas and hot tubs. Except here, it's older, simpler, and yet more luxurious because it took effort. Firewood, slaves, time, and attention all went into this heat. It wasn't convenience, it was craft. Nearby, a pair of men debate something about politics. You can't quite catch it, but it sounds heated. Another group discusses a play they saw at the amphitheater. There's a murmur of gossip. To a senator's daughter seen leaving a poet's home, a general rumored to be falling out of favor. the price of olive oil rising again. Every word swirls up with the steam, part of the atmosphere. This was social media before screens, rumors spreading, not through clicks, but through whispers echoing in the mist. And then, the cold shock. From the hot room, you step into the frigidarium. The air hits you like a winter breeze, and the water clear, still, mercilessly cold waits for you. You hesitate, of course, everyone does. Then you take the plunge. The shock steals your breath, your heart leaps, and for a moment, you're utterly alive. The ancient Romans believed this contrast between hot and cold made the body strong, balanced, ready to face life again. Maybe they were right. You climb out, skin tingling, and wrap yourself in a towel. The body feels lighter, the mind clearer. Around you, others are doing the same, some rubbing oils on their arms, others laughing, their skin flushed pink from the heat. And all of this entire ritual costs less than a loaf of bread. Bathing was cheap in Rome because emperors knew it kept people happy, keep the people clean and entertained, and they won't think too hard about politics. Clever, isn't it? Outside the baths, the city hums, street vendors shout, donkeys clatter down stone roads, smoke drifts up from bakeries. But in here, in this world of steam and marble, time has slowed. It's no longer about survival. It's about savoring the moment. And in that pause, people connected. The baths were equalizers, senators and slaves sweating side by side, pretending rank didn't matter for an hour. In that sense, the steam dissolved more than dirt, it blurred the edges of status, even if just temporarily. Still, the bathhouse wasn't all serenity. With gossip came trouble. Romans were nosy, and a good rumor could travel faster than a chariot. There were stories of deals made, lovers found, enemies overheard. Some even believed spirits wandered the steamy rooms after closing, whispering the day's secrets into the marble. Whether true or not, the bathhouse had an aura of mystery, half real, half imagined. You step back toward the entrance, the air cooling against your damp skin. Somewhere, a musician plucks at a lyre, soft notes echoing through the corridors. The baths weren't just for cleansing, they were for art, for talk, for thought. Great poets composed lines here. Philosophers debated ethics with towels around their waists. If someone wanted to change the world, they probably started by sharing the idea over a hot soak. And maybe that's the strangest part, how timeless it feels. Because when you think about it, people still gather to relax, to talk, to forget the outside noise. Whether it's a modern spa, a cafe, or even a cozy Discord call late at night, it's the same impulse. Connection through comfort. The Roman bathhouse was just humanity's earliest, steamiest version of that. You linger, one last moment, watching the condensation drip from the ceiling like tiny pearls. The voices fade, the water stills, and you feel that sleepy warmth that makes everything seem slower, kinder, softer. You dry your hands on a linen cloth and glance back at the shimmering air one final time before stepping outside. The world feels cooler now, quieter, but somehow you feel new again. Clean not just in body, but in thought. You step outside the steamy chamber, the cool air wrapping around you like a whisper of reality, and yet your mind lingers inside. That warmth, the hum of voices, the shimmer of steam, it clings to you in ways that water alone cannot wash away. You can almost still hear the laughter, the arguments, the soft rhythm of life echoing through stone and marble. It's strange how something so ordinary, just bathing, could feel so profound in ancient Rome. But that's the thing about humans, isn't it? We've always turned the simplest acts into rituals, and rituals into meaning. The Romans mastered that better than anyone. A bath wasn't just about getting clean. It was an event. People would spend hours preparing for it, just like you might plan a dinner or a movie night. They'd pick their best towels, scented oils, maybe even a companion or two. It was part of the rhythm of life. For the working poor, it was a rare luxury. For the rich, it was a daily expectation. Imagine hundreds of people cycling in and out of those vast rooms every day, the flow of humanity as constant as the flow of water itself. You'd think with all those bodies, all that sweat, all that chatter, the baths would feel chaotic. But somehow they didn't. The Romans had a strange talent for order within chaos. The architecture itself encouraged it. Every arch, every echoing wall was built to guide you deeper into calm. The noise faded as you moved inward, and by the time you reached the hot chambers, all you could hear was the muffled hum of people breathing, talking softly, and the soft splash of water against skin. It was civilization's heartbeat, wrapped in steam. Still, there were layers, here layers of status, of custom, of unspoken rules. Despite the equality of heat, everyone knew their place. Slaves weren't allowed to bathe at the same time as their masters, at least not officially. Men and women had separate hours or different wings entirely, though of course, the wealthy and the daring found ways around that. There were whispered stories of senators arranging accidental meetings, of artists sketching for study but with a little too much focus on certain details. Even in the ancient world, where people were used to nakedness, the line between innocent and indulgent was thin. The baths also had their critics. Some philosophers argued they made people soft, lazy, too comfortable. Stoics like Seneca wrote about the noise, the shouting of bathers, the splash of water, the sound of men being scrubbed, and how he longed for silence instead. But even he, deep down, must have known that these places weren't just distractions. They were the glue holding society together. Imagine what it meant for a weary soldier, back from the front lines, to finally sink into a hot pool and forget for a few hours the sound of war. Or, for a craftsman, his hands blistered from labor, to relax beside a merchant who sold silk from the East, both laughing at the same joke. In that steam, they were equals, if only for a heartbeat. The bathhouse also became a place of deals, political, personal, even romantic. A general might negotiate military support while a slave poured water over his shoulders. A poet might recite his verses to impress a patron. You could bribe someone, confess something, or flirt all under the same roof. And because everyone was relaxed, it was easier to talk, to listen, to agree. The Romans may have built their empire with roads and legions, but they held it together with conversation, and much of that conversation happened half naked, surrounded by mist. There was also something strangely democratic about it. The emperor himself could, in theory, walk in and share a bath with the baker, and though in practice he often had private rooms, the idea of shared humanity lingered. In the warm air, skin flushed and eyes softened, rank blurred, you couldn't tell a senator from a shopkeeper when both were covered in the same sweat and steam. Outside the bathhouse, Rome was a city of noise and dust and ambition. Streets crowded with carts, temples echoing with prayers, markets filled with the scent of wine and fish. But here, time dissolved. Maybe that's why people loved it so much. It was the one place where the world paused. The water didn't judge. The marble didn't care. It simply received you. If you looked around carefully, you'd see more than just people washing. You'd see the ritual, oil applied to the skin in slow circles, scraped away with the strigil, leaving a sheen that caught the lamplight. You'd hear conversations in low tones, politics, gossip, philosophy, all blending together into a kind of human symphony. There was music, too. In some of the grander thermi, musicians played softly in the background, their notes mingling with the hiss of steam. Even the smallest gestures seemed to have rhythm, and if you lingered long enough, you'd notice the bathhouse had its own characters. The loud storytellers who gathered a crowd, the quiet thinkers sitting in corners, eyes half closed, the flirt who never missed a chance to compliment someone's hair, the old men who spent all day debating whether the empire was falling apart. Everyone had their place. But the bathhouse wasn't always pure leisure. It also reflected the empire's machine-like precision. Heating a complex like this took enormous effort. Beneath the marble floors, slaves worked tirelessly, feeding fires that burned all day. They hauled wood, shoveled ash, stoked the furnaces. Their world was one of sweat and smoke, unseen by those above. For every warm sigh in the caldarium, there was a grunt of labor in the hypocaust. Comfort, as always, had its cost. As the empire grew, so did the baths. In cities from Africa to Britain, these great structures appeared like temples of warmth. Some could hold thousands of people at once. They had libraries, gyms, gardens, even restaurants attached. You could spend an entire day there without ever getting bored, and many did. To the Romans, bathing was as essential as eating. There's a quiet irony in that, though. The Romans were proud of their hygiene, yet their water systems were often lined. The same pipes that carried clean water to the baths slowly poisoned them. They called it progress. History calls it irony. But that's part of the story. Truth, the beauty and the blindness of an empire that wanted to be perfect. As the sun sets over the tiled roofs of Rome, you can imagine the last bathers leaving the thermi. Their skin glows under the lamplight as they step back into the cool air. refreshed and faintly perfumed with oil. Slaves mop the floors, scoop out the ashes, prepare for another day. The city outside buzzes with life again, but for now, the baths rest quiet, serene, waiting. It's easy to see why the Romans built so many. They weren't just monuments to cleanliness, they were sanctuaries of humanity. Inside those walls, the empire's citizens remembered what it meant to feel good, to breathe deeply, to be alive. The Romans might have conquered half the known world, but they also conquered comfort. And yet, all empires cool eventually. The fires that warmed the baths would someday burn out. When Rome fell, its great bathhouses became ghostly shells. Their marble floors cracked, their pools filled with dust instead of water. But their spirit didn't die. The idea of bathing, of warmth, shared in community, drifted eastward to Byzantium, to the Ottomans, to lands where the steam rose again in new shapes and languages. Imagine centuries later, far from Rome, in the city of Istanbul, the hiss of water once again filling a domed chamber. This time, the stones are different, the rituals new, but the heartbeat is familiar. The ancient bathhouse lives on, reborn as the hammam. And that's where we go next. The Roman bath may have fallen silent, but across the eastern horizon, its spirit survived in the shimmering light of another empire. The Ottomans took what the Romans built and turned it into poetry, a place where the soul was washed as much as the skin. The night air outside the ruins of Rome feels cooler now, the sky tinted orange with fading light. Somewhere, the last echoes of laughter fade into history, but the steam continues elsewhere, carried by time and tradition. You follow it eastward, toward a new kind of warmth, where stories are told through whispers and water, and where the ancient art of bathing becomes something almost sacred again. You follow that invisible thread of steam across time, across continents, until marble becomes mosaic, and Latin turns to the soft murmur of Turkish and Arabic. The air smells different here, rosewater instead of olive oil, sandalwood instead of cedar. The heat feels deeper, slower, as though it carries not just warmth but memory. You've arrived in the heart of an Ottoman hammam, where the bath has become something more than a daily ritual. It's almost a prayer made of water. It's a new world, and yet something ancient still hums beneath it. The Romans may have been the engineers of heat, but the Ottomans were the poets of steam. Their bathhouses were quieter, more mysterious. The noise of gossip and debate softened into whispers, into the sound of dripping water and gentle conversation. Here, people didn't come to boast or bargain. They came to shed something dirt, yes, but also exhaustion, sorrow, pride. The hammam was both sanctuary and mirror. You step through the wooden door, and a wave of warm air greets you like an embrace. Inside, light filters through tiny holes in the domed ceiling, forming beams that slice through the mist. Dust and steam swirl together, glowing gold in the dimness. The scent of soap, of marble warmed by centuries of touch, wraps around you. Someone laughs softly nearby. Somewhere, water is being poured, the sound rhythmic and soothing. It feels timeless. And in a way, it is. Because this place, this exact rhythm of warmth, washing, and whisper, has existed for more than 500 years without really changing. In Istanbul alone, hammams have outlived sultans, wars, and empires. The same rituals repeated by different hands, the same gestures passed down like inherited prayers. A typical visit began much like the Roman ones. You would undress, hand over your belongings to an attendant, and wrap yourself in a thin cotton towel called a pestamol. The world outside slipped away the moment the fabric touched your skin. Your voice softened, your heartbeat slowed. You were stepping into a tradition that believed cleansing was not just for the body. First, you'd enter the sokaklek, the cool, outer room. It was a transition space, a place to rest and prepare your mind. There might be benches, soft light, and the gentle trickle of fountains. Attendants moved silently, bringing cups of sherbet or tea to those waiting. The air was calm, scented faintly with lemon and soap. You'd sit there for a few minutes, feeling your thoughts drift away with the sound of water. Then came the iliklok, the warm room. The heat here was gentle, wrapping you in comfort rather than overwhelming you. The purpose wasn't to shock, but to soften, to coax your muscles into calm, to ease your breathing. The steam rose slowly, carrying the scent of the oils used before you even entered. It was like walking into a dream woven from water. And finally, the heart of the bath, the harata, the hot room. The air shimmered here, thick with steam, every breath heavy and slow. In the center stood a great slab of heated marble called the gagektasi, or navel stone. This was where you lay, stretched out like dough ready to be kneaded by skilled hands. Around you, attendants moved like ghosts, their skin glistening in the dim light. Buckets of warm water were poured in steady rhythm, splashing across your skin and onto the stone with a hiss. The attendants, often strong, quiet men or women trained since youth, worked with a kind of graceful precision. They used rough mitts to scrub away dead skin, not gently but firmly, until you felt raw and renewed. The feeling was strange, both intense and tender, almost symbolic, as though the outer layers of your worries were being peeled away till you could feel the marble beneath you vibrating faintly from the echoes of others' footsteps, from the soft splash of nearby basins. After the scrubbing came the washing long pours of water, each one warmer than the last, until the heat settled deep into your bones. Then came the soap, thick and fragrant, worked into foam and spread across your body in wide, slow motions. You were both cleansed and comforted. It was tactile poetry, the sound of water replacing words, the scent of olive soap replacing thought. People didn't talk much here, not like in the Roman baths. The hammam was quieter, more inward, but that didn't mean it was solemn. There was laughter too, especially in the women's baths, bursts of giggling that echoed like birds through the domes. Here, women who lived much of their lives behind veils and walls could relax, laugh freely, gossip, and share stories. The hammam was one of the few spaces where they ruled entirely a small kingdom of steam, chatter, and companionship. It wasn't uncommon for hammams to be social hubs for women. They'd spend hours there, not just bathing but celebrating engagements, births, even business deals. A woman's visit to the bath could be an event in itself. There were special perfumes, embroidered towels, even musicians playing soft tunes outside. Imagine the scene, a circle of women lounging on marble, steam rising around them, the air filled with laughter and the smell of rose oil. Secrets traded in the mist, songs hummed without words. Men's baths were quieter, but no less significant. For them, the hammam was a space of reflection, humility, even spirituality. Some came before prayer, others after long workdays. In Ottoman belief, cleanliness was close to godliness, not just as a saying, but as a way of life. Water was sacred, a bridge between the material and divine. So in the hammam, every act of washing could feel like a prayer of gratitude. And beyond the ritual, there was art. The architecture of these places was designed to speak in whispers. The domes above, pierced with star-shaped openings, scattered light like constellations. The sound of dripping water echoed in perfect harmony, carefully engineered by builders who understood how stone breathes. The floors were mosaics of color, blues, greens, golds, shimmering faintly beneath the thin film of moisture. Every detail was meant to calm you, to draw your gaze inward. Many travelers who entered an Ottoman hammam for the first time wrote about it with awe. They described the experience as sensual, almost otherworldly, but not in the way of indulgence. It was the sensation of being completely human, stripped of everything except your own skin and breath. The hammam reminded people that they were alive, fragile, and yet somehow eternal in the cycle of water and heat. It's easy to see why the hammam lasted for centuries. It wasn't just about washing away sweat. It was about washing away the world, about remembering that simplicity, warmth, water, care was enough. The attendants, though often poor, held quiet power. Their hands carried tradition, their gestures shaped by hundreds of years of practice. When they poured that final basin of cool water over your head, it wasn't just the end of a bath, it was a renewal. And when you stepped back into the soccerclack, wrapped again in your towel, the world felt gentler. The air outside the hammam always seemed a little brighter, the sun a little softer. You'd sip a cup of tea, maybe nibble on sweet dates, letting the calm sink in. People often said that leaving a hammam felt like being reborn, not in a grand spiritual way, but in a quiet, personal one. As empires rose and fell, hammams endured. They became landmarks, part of city life. Sultans built grand ones as gifts to their mothers or wives. Some were attached to mosques or markets, always at the heart of community. You could travel across the Ottoman lands, from Sarajevo to Damascus, and always find one waiting, familiar yet unique. Over time, though, the world began to change. Modern plumbing crept in, private bathrooms replaced public ones, and the hammam slowly lost its central role. But it never disappeared. Even today, in the winding streets of Istanbul, Marrakesh, or Cairo, you can still step inside one of these steam-filled sanctuaries and feel history breathing beside you. Close your eyes, and you might still hear it. The faint hiss of water poured from a copper bowl, the murmur of voices half hidden by mist, the soft sigh of marble as it releases its heat, the same sounds your ancestors might have heard hundreds of years ago, the same comfort, the same peace. And if you listen carefully enough, beneath the steady rhythm of dripping water, you might almost hear the echo of Rome. Buried deep in the walls, a whisper from another age saying, "We are still here." Because even when empires fall, the rituals that make us human endure. The Romans built the foundation, the Ottomans perfected the poetry, and we, somewhere between hot showers and scented candles, are still searching for that same feeling. To be warm, clean, and unburdened, if only for a moment. The hammam fades slowly in the background now, its domes shimmering like memories. Outside, the world is colder again, louder, but the warmth lingers in your skin, the scent of rose and soap still clinging to your breath. You've traveled centuries through water, and yet somehow, the story isn't over. Because wherever there is cold, humans will always build warmth, and wherever there is loneliness, they will gather around it. The baths were never just about heat or hygiene. They were about connection with ourselves, with others, with the quiet rhythm of life itself. And somewhere, out there in the folds of history, the next great bathhouse waits, still being built by the hands of those who refuse to forget how good it feels to simply be human in the steam. You step out of the Ottoman hammam, the steam still clinging faintly to your skin, and the world feels strangely bright. The air is crisp, clean, and different, the kind of cold that makes you crave warmth all over again. And so, without quite realizing it, you follow that craving eastward, past deserts and mountains, past the scent of rosewater and olive oil, until the air turns wet and mineral-rich. The language changes, the food, the rhythm of life, and the water, always water, is still waiting. This time, it waits in pools carved by nature itself. The Romans engineered their baths, the Ottomans turned them into sanctuaries. But in Japan, people seemed to listen to the land and simply asked, "Where does the water want to flow?" The answer became the Anzan, the hot spring. Here, deep in volcanic valleys and forested hills, the earth itself provides the warmth. Water bubbles up from beneath the rocks, carrying minerals that stain it milky white or jade green. It smells faintly of sulfur, sharp and clean, like something ancient exhaling. In the distance, snow covers the rooftops, but the baths are warm, steaming, alive. The Japanese word anzan literally means hot spring, but that translation misses its spirit. An anzan isn't just a place to soak, it's an entire philosophy. The heat isn't forced, it's borrowed from the earth. The silence isn't emptiness, it's respect. Even the way you move through the space feels like part of a ritual that's just been performed for centuries. If the Roman bathhouse was public life at its loudest, and the Ottoman hammam was its secret heart, then the Japanese onsen is its quiet soul. You arrive not to talk, not to gossip, not to do anything at all, but to be. A journey to one often begins in stillness, a narrow path through cedar forests, a wooden gate that creaks softly, the faint smell of tatami mats and rice straw. Shoes are removed, voices lowered, everything slows. Before you even touch the water, there's a lesson in humility. In every onsen there's a rule: you must wash yourself first, thoroughly. The washing stations line the side of the bathhouse, each with a small stool, a wooden bucket, and a handheld shower. You sit, not stand, and you clean yourself quietly, mindfully, no splashing, no rush. You not just preparing your body for the bath, you preparing your spirit to share the space. Because in the onsen, the water belongs to everyone. When you finally step into the pool, the world dissolves. The air is cold, but the water wraps around you like a memory. You can feel the minerals tingling against your skin. Sometimes, the steam rises so thickly that the mountains disappear. All that remains is the sound of a waterfall, the faint rustle of bamboo, the rhythm of your own breath. And in that quiet, you begin to understand something the Japanese have known for centuries, that warmth doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to come from fire or marble or conversation. It can be still. It can come from the earth, from silence, from being fully present in your own body. These baths, whether the natural onsen or the man-made sento found in cities, are deeply woven into Japanese life. Every neighborhood once had a sento, where people would gather after work, rinse away the day, and soak in water so hot it made their skin glow pink. In a way, it wasn't tea so different from the Roman baths or the hammams, a communal space where stories flowed alongside the water. But there's something more restrained here, more respectful. In the sento, conversation is soft, laughter subdued. The bathers are close, yet distant, as if everyone has silently agreed to share peace without breaking it. A glance, a nod, a quiet sigh. These are the languages of the bath. It's not just about cleanliness, it's about the Japanese sense of space, the beauty of what's left unsaid, the pause between words, the empty space between breaths, the stillness between ripples. The bath teaches this better than any book could. Outside, the seasons change, but the onsen stays the same. In winter, snowflakes fall into the steaming pools and melt on contact, vanishing in tiny sighs. In spring, petals from cherry blossoms drift onto the surface, pink against white mist. In autumn, the air smells of wood smoke and damp leaves, and the hills glow red with maple trees. Each visit feels different, but the warmth is constant, patient, grounding, eternal. There's a kind of poetry to how the Japanese see bathing, not as escape, but as return, to nature, to calm, to the rhythm of things that existed before humans did. Many onsens are built near shrines or temples, because the water itself is believed to be sacred, gifted by mountain spirits or earth gods. It's not uncommon for people to bow slightly before entering, a silent thank you to the unseen forces that keep the world warm. In older times, the onsen was not just for rest but for healing. Samurai soaked in the mineral waters to recover from battle. Monks used them to cleanse before rituals. Farmers would walk miles to bathe after long days in the fields, their bodies aching and stiff, and emerge light again. The water, rich with sulfur, iron, or magnesium, was said to cure everything from fatigue to heartbreak. And even if it didn't, it made life feel softer, kinder, more bearable. If you listen closely, you can hear the gentle repetition of time itself. The same splash, the same exhale, the same sigh of relief that has echoed through centuries. The people change, the buildings shift, but the rhythm never stops. There's an unspoken understanding here that modern life tries so hard to forget, that warmth, rest, and quiet are not luxuries, they're necessities. They're what keep us human. And the Japanese, with their deep sense of harmony, seem to have known this all along. Sometimes, after soaking for a while, you step out and cool yourself in the open air. The shock of cold against your flushed skin is sharp but refreshing, like a reminder that the world still exists beyond the steam. Maybe you sip a bottle of cold milk, as is the tradition, feeling your pulse slow down. Around you, the night hums softly. Cicadas whine through trees, distant laughter. Everything feels balanced. The onsen teaches patience. You can't rush heat, and you can't rush peace. It seeps into you slowly, like ink into paper. You leave lighter, quieter, as if something heavy has been rinsed away that you didn't even realize you were carrying. There's something universal in that feeling, isn't there? From Roman marble to Ottoman stone to Japanese cedar, across continents and centuries, people have always come to the same truth, that warmth isn't just survival, it's a language, and we all speak it, in our own way. But it's strange how, despite that, we've forgotten. Modern life runs on switches and thermostats now. Warmth is instant, invisible, electric. We tap a button, and heat hums through our homes, but it feels different, efficient, yes, but hollow, somehow. We've gained comfort and lost ritual. The old ways, the gathering, the silence, the shared breath, gave heat meaning. It wasn't just something you consumed, it was something you entered, like a conversation. Every culture turned bathing into a reflection of itself. The Romans sought order and community. The Ottomans sought purification and beauty. The Japanese sought harmony and mindfulness. And us, we seek speed, maybe too much of it. But if you ever sit in an onsen, quiet and still, the steam rising in soft tendrils around your face, you might feel something familiar. Not nostalgia exactly, something older, something human. The sense that, beneath all the noise of our modern world, we still carry a memory of warmth shared with others. The instinct to gather around water, or fire, or even silence, just to remember we belong somewhere. The water ripples once more, the reflection of the moon breaking apart in the surface. You stand, water cascading from your skin. And for a moment, it feels as though time stops, that every bathhouse in history is connected through this same shimmer of heat, the same human sigh, the same soft murmur of peace. And as you step out into the cool night, wrapped in cotton, surrounded by the scent of cedar and smoke, it's hard not to smile, because you realize something simple and profound. We've been chasing warmth not just to survive the cold, but to find each other in it. The warmth fades as the night air cools, and once again the journey continues, carried not by footsteps but by memory. The road stretches westward now, back toward Europe, but not the shining marble of Rome or the delicate domes of Istanbul. This is a darker time, quieter and rougher, when comfort had to be earned and warmth became a kind of miracle. The great Roman baths had crumbled into ruins, their mosaics buried beneath moss and mud. The aqueducts that once carried water across entire continents now stood broken, arches half swallowed by ivy. The world was colder, both literally and figuratively. You can almost feel that cold seeping in, the kind that bites, the kind that lingers in stone walls and beneath rough blankets. It's the early Middle Ages, and for most people, warmth is no longer a given. The mighty empire that once built temples to bathing has fallen, and in its place stand small villages, wooden huts, monasteries, and castles that creak in the wind. The great public baths are gone, and with them, the idea that being clean is part of being civilized. Imagine life then, narrow, muddy streets, the smell of smoke and animals in the air. People wake before dawn, pull on coarse wool clothing, and spend their days close to fire or frost. Water is everywhere, in rivers, rain, and wells, but it's no longer something you step into for pleasure. It's cold, dangerous, sometimes even considered sinful, because now the world has changed, not just in comfort, but in belief. The Church, rising to power across Europe, began to see bathing with suspicion. Cleanliness was still valued, yes, but not the kind that involved hot water and naked skin. There were fears that the old Roman habits of shared baths, of relaxation and luxury, led to sin. Bathhouses, once symbols of community, now carried the scent of temptation. Priests warned against vanity, against spending too much time pampering the body instead of cleansing the soul. Better to wash the heart than the skin, they would say. And yet, even in this colder, more cautious world, the human craving for warmth never disappeared. It simply hid itself in smaller rituals. In the corner of a peasant's hut, where the hearth burned all night, in the steam that rose from a wooden tub filled with rainwater, heated on a fire, in the way families would huddle together under thick blankets, their breath misting in the dim light. Bathing didn't vanish completely, it just became private, rare, a luxury for those who could afford it. The wealthy built small bath chambers inside their castles, where water was carried by servants in heavy buckets. The poor bathed maybe once or twice a year, often around special holy days or seasonal festivals. When spring came and rivers thawed, some would wade into the water and scrub away a year's worth of grime with sand or herbs. It wasn't about luxury anymore, it was survival and ritual. But still, the idea of the bathhouse lingered, like a ghost from Rome whispering through the centuries. In cities and towns, some communal baths continued to exist, small, smoky buildings where people could pay a coin for a basin of warm water. They were rough places, built of wood and stone, filled with laughter, gossip, and sometimes scandal. The Church frowned upon them, but the people came anyway, because even the most pious farmer or merchant still longed for the simple relief of heat and water. There's something deeply human about that rebellion, the refusal to give up comfort entirely. You can almost picture it, a medieval town at dusk, the streets dimly lit by torches. Somewhere between the tavern and the blacksmith's forge stands a low building, steam curling out from its roof. Inside, people sit in tubs or lean over wooden basins, their voices low, their faces glowing in the candlelight. The air smells of wood smoke, sweat, and lavender oil. It's not elegant, but it's warmth. It's life, of course. The line between cleanliness and pleasure was thin, and not everyone who entered those baths came just to wash. Many bathhouses became meeting places for lovers, for secrets, for sins whispered between the bubbles. So, the Church's suspicions were not entirely unfounded. In many towns, moralists railed against these places, and over time, especially during outbreaks of disease, public bathing began to be seen as dangerous. When the Black Death swept through Europe in the 14th century, fear changed everything again. People started to believe that hot water opened the pores and let the plague in. To bathe, they thought, was to invite death itself. So they stopped. Windows were shut, fires burned low, and the scent of sweat and smoke replaced the freshness of soap. The body became something to endure, not to tend, and yet warmth still found its way into human life. In monasteries, monks preserved fragments of the old traditions. They built small, heated rooms for washing, not for luxury, but for discipline and health. They tended herb gardens where rosemary, sage, and thyme were grown not only for cooking but for cleansing. The act of bathing became almost sacred again, a ritual of renewal rather than indulgence. In Northern Europe, where winters were harsh and water often frozen, people turned to other ways of finding heat. The Finnish sauna was born out of necessity, a small wooden cabin with a stone stove at its center, filled with steam and silence. Unlike the Roman bathhouse, the sauna didn't need marble or mosaics. It was humble, dark, and deeply human. Inside, the air was thick with heat, the walls dripping with condensation. People sat naked, unashamed, their faces flushed red as they tossed ladles of water onto the hot stones. The hiss filled the air, a sound both violent and soothing, and when the sweat poured down their skin, they would rush outside, roll in snow, or dive into icy lakes, a shock that felt like being born again. It's easy to imagine that moment, the cold stealing your breath, the sky so wide it feels eternal, and then, back inside, the sweet relief of fire and steam. The sauna was more than just warmth. It was purification, community, therapy. Families and friends gathered there to talk, to sing, to heal. In those dark northern nights, it became the heart of life itself. Even today, in Finland and other parts of Scandinavia, the sauna holds that same magic. It's said that more important decisions have been made in saunas than in boardrooms. People step inside equals, stripped of their titles and troubles. It's the great leveler, the place where the rich and the poor, the young and the old, sit side by side and sweat together in the dark. And so, even as the rest of Europe shivered in superstition and disease, in those steamy wooden cabins, the old faith in heat endured. The idea that warmth could cleanse not just the body but the spirit. The same idea that had flowed through Roman aqueducts, echoed beneath Ottoman domes, and whispered across Japanese mountains. Centuries would pass before Europe rediscovered bathing as a public joy again. But in these small, quiet corners, the flicker of a fire in a peasant's cottage, the sweat-stained walls of a sauna, the bubbling cauldron of a village bathhouse, the story of warmth survived, passed from hand to hand, steam to steam, until the world was ready to remember it again. It's strange to think how something so simple, hot water, shared heat, could rise and fall like empires. But maybe that's the lesson. Civilizations don't just build cities, they build ways of feeling human. And when those fall apart, it's the smallest rituals that keep the ember alive. A bath, a fire, a shared breath in the cold. Somewhere, in a lonely stone village under a winter sky, a family gathers by the hearth. The flames flicker, the wind howls outside, and for a moment, the whole world is reduced to one small circle of warmth. They don't know that their humble act, sitting close, breathing the same smoky air, is part of a story that began thousands of years before them. But it always is. The centuries roll on, and the fire keeps burning. Europe begins to stir again after its long, cold sleep. The old ghosts of Rome are still whispering in the ruins, and slowly, very slowly, people start to listen. The medieval fear of water starts to fade like frost in morning sun, replaced by curiosity, by memory, by longing. For so long, warmth had been something you fought for, a hearth, a blanket, a bit of soup in the pot. But now, as cities grow and trade returns, warmth starts to mean something different again. Comfort, luxury, pleasure. Picture a street in 15th century Florence. The smell of bread and olive oil floats through the air. Artists sketch in courtyards, merchants haggle over silk and spices, and for the first time in centuries, the idea of beauty feels safe again. People start to care about how they look, how they smell, how they live, and water, clean, flowing, scented water finds its way back into their lives. The wealthy build private baths in their villas, sometimes modeled on the old Roman style, marble tubs, bronze taps, perfumed oils. In those quiet, candlelit rooms, the past comes alive. You can almost hear the echo of Roman fountains through the splash of Renaissance hands. In many ways, the rediscovery of bathing was the rediscovery of the body itself. For centuries, it had been wrapped in gilt and linen. Now, painters studied every curve, every line, every shade of skin, turning anatomy into art. Doctors began to write about health and hygiene. Philosophers debated the balance between body and soul. And in the midst of it all, people began to see water not as danger, but as renewal. Public bathhouses reappeared too, this time with a little more sophistication. In Paris, Venice, and Prague, new establishments offered not just warmth but experience. Wooden tubs lined with linen, herbal infusions, attendants with sponges and towels. Musicians played lutes while scented steam drifted through the air. There was laughter again, conversation, the kind of gossip that always bubbles up when people gather half-naked in warm rooms. But the shadow of the old fears lingered. Moralists warned that too much bathing led to vanity, that shared steam could stir the wrong kinds of thoughts. Still, the desire for heat and human closeness proved stronger. The bathhouse became both a refuge and a temptation, a place where people could forget their worries, their debts, their sins, if only for an hour. And it wasn't just Europe that rediscovered the pleasure of warmth. Far to the east, the Islamic world had never truly forgotten it. In the heart of the Ottoman Empire, bathhouses, the hammams, stood like palaces of steam. Inside, light filtered through tiny holes in domed ceilings, scattering stars of brightness across the marble floors. The air shimmered with heat and the scent of rosewater. Here, bathing was not only about cleanliness, but ritual purification before prayer, relaxation after toil, a sacred balance between body and soul. Women gathered in hammams to talk, to share secrets, to celebrate births and weddings. Men came to discuss business, politics, poetry. The bathhouse was the social heart of the city, a place where class, language, and age melted away in the same steam. Each visitor followed a rhythm older than memory. The warm room, the hot room, the cold plunge. Scrubbed, rinsed, and perfumed, they emerged glowing, reborn into the dusty streets. It's strange how warmth connects us across time. A Roman patrician in his marble caldarium, a peasant by a wooden hearth, a merchant in an Ottoman hammam, all chasing the same feeling, that slow sigh of relief when heat seeps into your bones. It's the most universal comfort, the one thing that never goes out of fashion. By the 17th century, Europe had caught up again. Bathing was back, but now it came with science. Physicians began writing thick books about the benefits of hot and cold water, how it improved circulation, soothed the nerves, cleared the complexion. There were even theories about different kinds of water: spring water for beauty, mineral water for strength, seawater for melancholy. People started traveling long distances to take the waters, pilgrimages, not to holy relics, but to spas. Bath towns sprang up everywhere. Bath in England, Baden-Baden in Germany, Vichy in France, Karlovy Vary in Bohemia. Each promised a cure for something: gout, rheumatism, heartbreak. Visitors came with hopes and purses equally open. They drank from fountains that tasted faintly of metal, soaked in steaming pools, and wandered through manicured gardens, pretending that health and happiness were just a matter of temperature. In these new spas, the old spirit of the bathhouse returned in disguise: less nakedness, more etiquette. Ladies wore muslin gowns, men donned modest robes, and everyone spoke softly, while the mineral water worked its supposed magic. The air was thick with perfume and polite conversation, but beneath it all, the same ancient pleasure hummed: warmth, water, company. The wealthy turned bathing into fashion. They had porcelain tubs installed in their homes, filled with buckets carried by servants. They perfumed the water with lavender and bergamot, lit candles, and read poetry by the glow. Artists painted scenes of bathers reclining like goddesses. Poets compared love to immersion, to drowning in warmth. Cleanliness became elegance, and the line between health and luxury blurred until no one could tell them apart. And yet, for most ordinary people, the story was still much rougher. A farmhand in rural France might wash once a week in a basin. A miner in England might scrape dirt off with straw. But even for them, warmth remained something to be cherished. The hearth after a long day, the small tin tub filled on Sundays, the first hot drink of winter. Civilization advanced in marble and gold, but it always came down to that same fragile flame, keeping the cold out, one breath at a time. As the centuries passed, bathing took on new meanings. During the Enlightenment, philosophers started talking about nature and purity, about returning to simple pleasures. Some believed that bathing in rivers made you morally cleaner, closer to the divine. Others, like doctors and inventors, saw it as progress, a way to conquer dirt, disease, and discomfort through reason and plumbing. The Industrial Revolution turned water into a kind of magic. Suddenly, with iron pipes and boilers, heat could be summoned with a turn of a handle. The bath became democratic, mechanical, almost ordinary, but no less miraculous. Imagine it. The first time someone in a London townhouse twisted a tap and watched steaming water pour out, no servants needed. The hiss, the splash, the smell of soap. It must have felt like a spell. And with that spell came something new, privacy. For thousands of years, bathing had been public, shared, communal. Now, it became personal. People shut their doors, locked the steam away. The bathhouse faded again, replaced by porcelain tubs and tiled bathrooms. The gossip and laughter that once filled Roman thermae and Ottoman hammams disappeared into the hum of pipes. Cleanliness became not a social ritual, but a solitary one. Still, the old ghosts lingered. In the foggy cities of the 19th century, public baths made a brief return, not as luxury, but as charity. For the poor crowded into tenements, these baths were lifelines. Huge municipal buildings with rows of tubs and showers, where a few pennies could buy you warmth, soap, and dignity. The steam rose, the noise echoed, and for an hour, the weary laborers could forget the factory and remember what it meant to feel human. At the same time, the spa towns grew grander. Aristocrats and artists flocked to them, turning health into spectacle. They lounged by thermal pools, discussed philosophy, flirted, and wrote letters home about the curative power of warm water. Some of the great romances and revolutions of Europe were whispered beside those pools. And beyond Europe, other traditions kept the old flame alive. In Japan, the onsen, the natural hot spring, had been part of life for over 1,000 years. There bathing was not luxury or cure, but communion with nature. The Japanese saw steam rising from the earth as a gift from the gods. To sit in an onsen was to return to the source, to feel the world's heartbeat against your skin. The air would be cold, the mountains silent, the water scalding hot. A place where you could let go of everything, your clothes, your worries, your thoughts, and just exist. Monks meditated there. Poets wrote haiku about it. Families traveled miles to soak together in peace. No marble, no perfume, just water, rock, and sky. It's a reminder that all these traditions, for all their variety, speak the same language: warmth, rest, and release. Even as technology transformed the world, trains, gas lamps, electric lights, people kept coming back to that same old ritual. Because in the end, what is civilization without comfort? What is progress without peace? We built empires, machines, and cities, but still needed a place to melt away for a while, to feel the heat in our bones, and remember that we are soft, living things. You can almost hear it now, the quiet splash, the whisper of steam against skin, the sigh of someone leaning back into the water. A sound older than history, older than language. The same sound that once filled Roman halls, medieval huts, Ottoman domes, and Japanese valleys. The same sound that fills our modern bathrooms, muffled by tile and time. Maybe that's the real story. Civilization rises and falls, beliefs shift, technologies come and go. But somewhere, in every age, there's always someone sitting in warm water, closing their eyes and letting the world drift away. Steam drifts forward into the new century, and the world is about to change faster than anyone can imagine. The 20th century arrives like a rush of hot air from an open furnace. Machines roar, cities sprawl, and humanity learns how to bottle heat, wire it, and sell it by the kilowatt. For the first time in history, warmth isn't a struggle, it's a commodity. but the memory of the old bathhouses lingers, curling quietly under all that progress, like a faint trace of soap left on a marble floor. In the great cities of the industrial age, London, New York, Paris, Berlin, water moves through pipes and radiators like blood through veins. No more hauling buckets from wells, no more waiting for kettles to boil. A twist of a tap, a turn of a valve, and there it is, comfort on command. The bathroom, once a place of ritual or scarcity, becomes the most private room in the modern home. It's lined with tile, lit by gas or electric lamps, stocked with glass bottles and white towels. The bath itself gleams like porcelain moonlight, a small shrine to modern convenience. And yet, even with all that modernity, something ancient stirs when the water begins to run. The sound of it fills the small space, steady, soothing, familiar. People still close their eyes and sink into the warmth, the way their ancestors did in marble halls or wooden tubs. They may not think about it, but they are keeping the same promise humanity has whispered to itself since the first fire was lit, that life is easier, kinder, softer when there is heat. As factories churn and cities smoke, the public baths transform. No longer just places for cleanliness, they become institutions, tiled cathedrals of hygiene and health. In the 1920s, huge municipal bathhouses stand in industrial towns from Glasgow to Detroit, offering working-class families a few moments of escape from coal dust and grime. The air hums with conversation, the splash of children, the clatter of soap on the floor. For a small fee, you can wash away the world for a while. In Japan, the sentu thrives, the urban cousin of the onsen, serving the same spiritual and communal role. You can find one on nearly every street corner, men on one side, women on the other, separated by a thin wooden wall, but united by the shared rhythm of washing, rinsing, soaking, talking. Old friends catch up, neighbors share local news, strangers become familiar faces through the fog. It's a routine that feels sacred in its simplicity, a pause in the rush of modern life, where warmth still means connection. Across the sea, in the Turkish hammams, the marble still gleams, the domes still catch light, and the rituals remain the same. Steam curls through arches built centuries earlier, and the masseurs work their practiced hands over tired backs, kneading away the stiffness of modernity. Time slows in there. Phones, cars, the chaos of city streets, all of it disappears in the hum of water. Even as electric heaters and gas furnaces spread, humanity doesn't abandon its love affair with warmth. It just changes the setting. The 1950s bathroom becomes a symbol of post-war progress. Chrome faucets, pink tiles, bubble baths and glossy advertisements promising domestic bliss. The perfect housewife, smiling beside her spotless tub, sells the dream of comfort to a generation recovering from the coldness of war. In those ads, bathing becomes not just cleanliness or ritual, but identity. Warm water equals safety, stability, a return to peace. Still, not everyone can forget what warmth once meant. Soldiers remember the feel of a hot shower after months in the trenches. Refugees remember the rare kindness of a steaming bowl of soup. For them, heat isn't a commodity, it's grace, something that touches deeper than the skin. As the decades roll by, technology keeps finding new ways to simulate comfort. Central heating fills entire buildings with gentle warmth, radiating from unseen pipes. Saunas make their way west from Finland, promising rejuvenation and detoxification. The sweat lodges of indigenous cultures, the mud baths of the Middle East, the steam rooms of Europe. All these old ways find new life in the modern wellness industry. Every age, it seems, reinvents the same truth, that there's something almost spiritual in the simple act of feeling warm. But with convenience comes isolation. Once, warmth was shared, a hearth, a bathhouse, a communal fire. Now it's piped into every apartment, every car, every office. You don't need anyone else to stay warm anymore. The body cocooned in comfort forgets the intimacy of gathering for heat. The gossip that once drifted between marble columns or hammam benches now floats instead across glowing screens. The warmth of human presence replaced by the artificial hum of central air. Still, something inside us remembers. Why else would we light candles when we take baths, or sit for hours in hot tubs, or spend small fortunes on spa days? Why else do we crave saunas and steam rooms, even in a world where heat is everywhere? It's not just about temperature, it's about touch and atmosphere. and the echo of 1,000 generations who came before us, all of them seeking the same thing. The modern spa borrows from all its ancestors: the clean geometry of Roman design, the aromatic rituals of the Ottoman hammam, the natural serenity of the Japanese anzen. You can walk into a wellness center in Berlin, New York, or Seoul, and find traces of them all. Eucalyptus, steam, dim light, a pool that pretends to be ancient. We rebuild the past again and again, chasing a feeling that never quite goes away. By the late 20th century, warmth had become luxury again, not survival, not necessity, but indulgence. Heated floors, whirlpool tubs, electric blankets. Companies advertise not comfort, but wellness. You don't just bathe, you detox. You don't just warm up, you rejuvenate. The words change, but the desire underneath them stays the same. The longing to return, to sink into something soft and forgiving, to forget for a moment that the world outside is sharp and cold. And yet, even as the modern world perfects artificial comfort, it begins to crave authenticity. The more automated our warmth becomes, the more we miss the human side of it, the sounds, the smells, the small imperfection of real life. In cities full of climate control, people start booking retreats to old bathhouses, mountain springs, desert spas. They go back to the elements, back to places where steam rises from stone and water still breathes. The line between the ancient and the modern blurs completely. In Tokyo, you can find an onsen built inside a skyscraper, fed by natural hot springs. In Budapest, Roman ruins and Turkish domes surround pools of geothermal water where locals soak as they have for 2,000 years. In Marrakesh, hammams that once served travelers and traders now welcome tourists under candlelight. The same rituals reborn as luxury. It's funny, in a way. For all our progress, our machines, our insulation, our endless comforts, we still need to be reminded to slow down and warm up. We build schedules, appointments, routines around the very thing that our ancestors did instinctively, stopping for a while, letting warmth work its quiet magic. And maybe that's the secret hidden inside all these centuries of steam and stone. The bathhouse was never just about the water, it was about presence. When you sit in the heat, the noise of the world fades, your thoughts untangle. You remember that the body and the mind aren't enemies, just two sides of the same soft thing. You don't have to fight the cold, you only have to let the warmth in. The 20th century ends with glowing cities, digital screens, and perfectly controlled temperatures. But somewhere in every home, someone still draws a bath, watches the water rise, and feels the steam against their face. Somewhere, a light flickers on the surface, and the same thought passes quietly through the room. How something as ordinary as hot water can feel so close to sacred. And outside those tiled walls, the great thread of human warmth keeps stretching backward and forward at once. From the flickering fires of prehistoric caves to the marble baths of Rome, from the hammams of Istanbul to the neon spas of Seoul, every culture has told the same story in its own way. It's the story of our oldest comfort, our simplest ritual, our most human need, to feel warm, to feel clean, and to feel connected, if only for a moment. The 21st century begins with a hum. Not the hum of people talking or water running, but the quiet electrical heartbeat of machines. Warmth, once something you had to earn, is now built into everything. The floor, the car seat, even the phone in your hand. We live in a world where the cold can barely reach us. Our homes glow at the touch of a button. Our showers remember the perfect temperature, and even the air is adjusted to our liking. But in all this perfection, something starts to slip away. Warmth used to be a gathering. Now it's an algorithm. In old cities, some of the bathhouses still stand, their marble walls cracked, their domes dim, but still breathing. Steam curls up where it always has, like the breath of time itself. Tourists come now with cameras and smartphones, snapping pictures of the light falling through ancient holes in stone. They post it online, hashtags and filters, digital ghosts of real heat. But those who stay long enough, who let the warmth seep in, who listen, still feel the old rhythm beating beneath the marble, the heartbeat of humanity that never stopped, no matter how cold the centuries became. Outside, in our modern world, the rhythm is different. Life runs faster now, sharper. We rush from building to car, to screen to bed. We rarely stop long enough to feel the simple, physical pleasure of warmth, the way it loosens the jaw, calms the mind, slows the pulse. We've become so good at staying comfortable that we've forgotten how to notice comfort at all. The heater hums quietly in the background, unnoticed until it fails. But the need doesn't disappear, it just hides. You see it in small things: people gathering around coffee cups in winter, strangers huddling under awnings when it rains, the sudden hush that falls when a hot drink touches cold hands. We may not have bathhouses anymore, but we still find our way back to heat in small rituals. A hot shower after a long day, a blanket wrapped around our shoulders, a laptop resting on our knees like a tiny hearth. In recent years, people have begun to talk about something called slow living, the idea that not every moment needs to be optimized or efficient, that there's value in stillness, in sensory things like the smell of soap, the sound of water, the way heat fogs a mirror. In a strange way, we're rediscovering what the ancients always knew, that comfort isn't just physical, it's spiritual. That warmth is not only something you feel on the skin, but something that seeps inward, softening thoughts, unraveling tension, making space for peace. Modern wellness culture, for all its glossy marketing, is built on that ancient longing. The spa, the sauna, the steam room, the scented bath, they're all echoes of the old temples of water and fire. But beyond the luxury, something quieter calls to people. It's the wish to reconnect, to slow down, to feel the body without judgment, to breathe deeply, to let the heat undo the tight knots of time. It's no accident that digital life has brought the return of sensory rituals. When so much of what we do happens on flat screens and silent keyboards, the physical world starts to feel distant. People seek it again: the weight of real water, the scent of real herbs, the warmth that can't be simulated. Some build tiny saunas in their backyards. Others travel halfway across the world for thermal springs buried in the mountains. In a time when we can talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly, we still crave the oldest, simplest human feeling: being warm together. In the Nordic countries, the sauna never disappeared. It remained a constant thread in everyday life, a place not just to sweat, but to talk, to think, to breathe. There's something deeply democratic about it. Everyone sits equal in the steam, stripped of titles and uniforms. Business deals, confessions, laughter, and silence all share the same air. When you step out, your skin flushed, your lungs full of clean air, you feel both emptied and renewed. That moment, stepping from the heat into the cool night, the stars above, it's the same feeling a Roman might have had, stepping from the caldarium into the frigidarium 2,000 years ago. Time folds in on itself in the warmth. Elsewhere, ancient rituals take on modern shapes. In Los Angeles, there are bathhouses where electronic music mixes with mist, where people meditate in sound baths, another kind of cleansing. In Tokyo, onsens are redesigned as architectural sanctuaries, minimalist and serene, where even the silence feels curated. In Istanbul, the hammam lives on, not as nostalgia, but as continuity. The marble slabs still glisten, the attendants still pour water from brass bowls, and the air still hums with conversation that flows like steam itself. It's fascinating how we keep circling back, how no matter how advanced we become, we still find our peace in the same elements our ancestors did: water, heat, light, and touch. We've built skyscrapers and satellites, but in the end, the most human moments are still the quiet ones, when you feel warmth on your skin and the world feels, if only briefly, kind. In some ways, the modern bathhouse has gone digital too. Not in the literal sense, but in the way people share it. 1,000 images online, candles, bathtubs, cups of tea, fogged windows, all small altars to comfort. Self-care, they call it. A phrase that sounds new but isn't. The Romans called it ostium, the Greeks called it eudaimonia, the Ottomans saw it as balance, the Japanese as harmony. Different names, same feeling. The idea that caring for yourself, truly caring, means allowing stillness, warmth, and quiet to take root again. But even that digital warmth, shared through screens, has its own kind of beauty. It's proof that even in a world of pixels and notifications, we still dream in human senses. We still want the glow, the hush, the slow rhythm of water. If you step back and look at the entire history, from the steam of ancient bathhouses to the click of modern thermostats, it tells a strangely intimate story, not of progress or invention, but of continuity. Every civilization, in its own way, has built spaces where the world slows down and warmth takes over. Places where people could meet without pretense, could wash, talk, rest, and remember what it means to feel human. Maybe that's why, even now, after thousands of years, we still talk about warming up to someone. We call people cold or warm-hearted. We describe comfort in the language of heat. It's embedded deep in how we understand connection. To be warm isn't just to be cozy, it's to be alive, open, trusting. To be cold is to be distant, alone, withdrawn. The metaphors never change because the feeling never did. In our modern homes, surrounded by quiet machines that manage the temperature for us, we still light candles and take baths, and gather by fireplaces that don't really need to burn anymore. We do it out of instinct. The same instinct that drove early humans to huddle around campfires, that led Romans to build caldariums, Ottomans to carve hammams, Japanese monks to soak in hot springs. It's the instinct to make warmth into meaning. When you think about it, it's kind of beautiful that for all our brilliance, for all our technology, we never outgrew the need to feel heat against our skin. Progress may have changed how we bathe, how we heat our homes, how we connect, but it hasn't changed what we crave: the quiet, the steam, the pause between breaths when the world feels soft again. And so, the story circles back once more, from the ancient bathhouse to the glowing bathroom light, from marble to tile, from gossip to silence. The settings change, the materials evolve, but the core remains the same. We are creatures who seek warmth, in water, in fire, in each other. The steam fades, but the warmth stays. There's something timeless about steam, the way it curls up, then disappears, soft as breath. You can stand there, watching it rise from the surface of hot water, and feel as if you're re-looking at a thought forming, then fading before you can grasp it. That's what the bathhouse has always been, really, a place where thoughts take shape and dissolve again. You enter heavy, crowded with noise and worries, and leave emptied light, a little blurred at the edges. For centuries, that was what people sought, not just cleanliness, but forgetfulness, a temporary amnesia from the dust of the world. When you think of all those people, the Romans wrapped in towels, the Ottomans lying back on warm marble, the Victorians whispering behind clouds of soap, it's like a long chain of humanity linked through time by warmth. The architecture may have changed, but the gestures didn't. A hand reaching for water, a sigh, the way shoulders drop when tension finally gives up. Even now, in small apartments or expensive spas, the ritual repeats itself in miniature. You draw the bath, test the water, step in slowly, let your body surrender. You close your eyes and time softens. It's strange how easily the simplest act can bridge centuries. The feeling of hot water on skin hasn't evolved. It doesn't need to. Every drop carries the same promise, that the body can be trusted again, that comfort still exists, that you are not just a machine of bones and thought. In a world that demands constant movement, stillness feels radical, and the bath, that old sanctuary of heat and hush, becomes almost an act of rebellion, a small, private refusal to rush. If the ancient bathhouse was where gossip and community lived, the modern one, the solitary bathtub, the quiet shower, has become something else, a confessional without words. How many thoughts have floated up with steam? How many decisions made in that silent cocoon? It's where people cry softly, where they imagine answers, where they meet themselves. The walls don't echo, but they listen. There's an intimacy to water that few other things have. Fire dazzles, but it separates. It burns. Water welcomes. It holds you, reshapes itself around you, accepts you completely. In the bathhouse, that embrace was shared. Hundreds of bodies, hundreds of stories, merging into one shared warmth. But in modern solitude, it's a private reunion, you and the element that once cradled all life. For a few quiet minutes, everything outside the tub or shower fades away. The emails, the voices, the obligations gone. What remains is something ancient, the sound of water against skin, steady, soft, endless. And maybe that's what humanity keeps chasing, the memory of being held, in water, in arms, in warmth. That's why we gather, why we talk, why we build spaces to share the elements safely. The bathhouse was more than plumbing and architecture. It was an emotional technology. It turned strangers into companions, soothed fears, eased loneliness, and wrapped it all in heat. You left cleaner, yes, but hard, could still be gentle. And maybe that's the quiet genius of those ancient places. They made gentleness visible. They turned care into architecture. The domes weren't just aesthetic. They caught sound, softened it, made conversation echo like music. The marble wasn't just for luxury. It stored heat, giving back warmth long after the fire died. Even the symmetry of the rooms had a purpose, to remind visitors that comfort is balance, that the world feels right when things are proportionate. We've replaced those spaces with bathrooms and spas, but the desire hasn't changed. We still decorate them with candles, with scents, with music. We try to create small versions of eternity, places where time feels slower, kinder. We might think of them as personal indulgence, but in truth, they're memory, fragments of a tradition we never quite forgot. If you've ever stepped out of a hot bath into a cold room, you've lived the same moment the Romans built entire structures around. That shiver, that tingling rush as your body adjusts, the conversation between opposites that ancient architects designed on purpose, heat and cold, expansion and contraction. Life, after all, is built on those opposites. You can't feel one without the other, and in that sense, the bathhouse becomes a metaphor for living. You enter burdened, you immerse yourself in warmth, you shed layers, you let go, you step out lighter, aware again of your own skin. Every visit is a small death and rebirth, an ending and beginning wrapped in steam. It's easy to see why so many cultures linked bathing with purity, both physical and spiritual. Cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was renewal. If we zoom out, far out, across time, the story of the bathhouse isn't just about water and architecture. It's about how humans keep inventing ways to reconnect with themselves and each other. The ancient bathhouse, the medieval hammam, the modern spa, even the simple act of washing hands, they all belong to the same lineage, a lineage of touch, heat, and humility. It's humbling, really, that something so ordinary could hold so much meaning. We spend our lives chasing extraordinary things, success, fame, innovation, and yet the deepest peace comes from something as basic as warm water. Maybe the ancients had it right. Maybe the path to wisdom isn't up, but inward, into the steam, into the silence, into the heartbeat that pulses beneath the skin. The older we get as a species, the more circular our inventions become. Virtual spaces that mimic real gatherings, apps that track mindfulness, technologies designed to simulate human touch. But perhaps we don't need more simulations. Perhaps we just need to remember the feeling of sitting quietly in warmth, the sound of water, the slow rhythm of breathing in sync with others. The world doesn't need to stop for that, only we do. In a way, the ancient bathhouse was humanity's first therapy session. No one called it that, but it worked the same way. You came in, tense, tired, disconnected. You left lighter. The water didn't judge. The heat didn't demand. It simply invited. And in that invitation, something healed. The stories that drifted through those marble halls weren't just gossip. They were confessions, reflections, laughter stitched with pain. The steam blurred the line between truth and comfort, and somehow, that made both easier to bear. Even now, in our own private rituals, we echo that same rhythm. We lock the bathroom door, turn on the tap, and let the world fade. We light a candle not for illumination, but for quiet. The flicker, the scent, the sound, it's all memory, ancient and immediate. For a few moments, time folds. You are every person who ever sought warmth. When you think about it like that, the bathhouse never really vanished. It just scattered. It lives in every home, every cup of tea, every shared blanket, in every moment when warmth passes from one person to another. Because warmth, whether physical or emotional, is the closest thing we have to immortality. It's what lingers when the steam fades, what memory keeps when the marble crumbles. And maybe, just maybe, that's what humanity has always been chasing. Not luxury, not cleanliness, not even community, but continuity. The feeling that, across all the centuries and civilizations, someone else has sat where you sit, sighed the same sigh, felt the same heat against their skin, and known, for one fleeting second, that life is good. The steam swirls, soft and endless. The echoes of laughter, footsteps, whispers, all dissolve into it. Somewhere, deep beneath the noise of the world, the bathhouse breathes, and if you listen closely enough, you can still hear it, the heartbeat of warmth. Steady, eternal, human. The steam has a way of making the world soft. Sounds melt into it, enter the bathhouse, the change is almost shocking, not because of the heat, but because of what the heat allows. He exhales. He sets down the invisible armor of vigilance, and for the first time in weeks, he feels softness. Around him, men talk of theatre, of grain prices, of lovers. Their laughter echoes through the vaults. He listens, not quite part of it yet, but comforted by the hum of normal life. The bathhouse, in that moment, is a reminder. The world goes on, and he belongs to it. Across the centuries, another scene plays out in the Ottoman hammam. A merchant, exhausted from days of bargaining in the market, reclines on the warm stone floor. His back sinks into the marble, and he feels it radiate upward, a slow wave that loosens every knot in his body. Nearby, two women laugh softly as attendants pour warm water over their hair, their words blending with the rhythmic splashing of copper bowls. Somewhere in the haze, the scent of olive oil and lemon drifts. The world outside, the noise, the negotiation, the hierarchy, feels far away. In here, everyone is just skin and breath and warmth. That leveling effect is something modern life rarely gives us anymore. Outside, everything is ranked: status, looks, success. Inside the ancient bathhouse, those lines blurred. You could be rich or poor, soldier or scholar, noble or servant, but once stripped of your clothes, you were simply a body among other bodies, equal before the steam. It wasn't perfect equality, of course. Some baths were grander, some entry more expensive. But even so, the bathhouse created a space where humanity could briefly forget its own divisions. And that's the paradox of those places. They were intimate, yet public. You could be surrounded by dozens of others and still feel a kind of privacy that only warmth provides. Steam is protective that way. It softens what's visible, hides imperfections, makes everyone appear a little more beautiful, a little less defined. It's hard to be self-conscious when the air itself embraces you. In many cultures, bathhouses were also places where boundaries shifted in subtler ways. Secrets were exchanged there. Lovers met, alliances formed, deals whispered through fog. Steam doesn't only blur vision, it also invites honesty. Perhaps because you can't see clearly, you speak more clearly. And what's said in the steam often stays there, ephemeral, unrecorded, like a breath that vanishes as soon as it's spoken. Think of the Roman poets who wrote about these moments: Catullus, Martial, Ovid, all describing scenes of laughter, desire, confession. They knew that the bathhouse wasn't only about water, it was about the pulse of life. It was a mirror to society, reflecting its beauty and its flaws alike. In those marble chambers, emperors and beggars alike discovered how fragile they were beneath the surface. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the ghosts of those conversations. The sound of dripping water, the scrape of a strigil on skin, the low murmur of voices. Someone telling a friend about a dream, someone else whispering about a forbidden love, the laughter of a child splashing in the corner, the sigh of an old man lowering himself into the hot pool, bones creaking but spirits still willing, each sound blending into a single, timeless chorus of humanity. The bathhouse was never just a building. It was a kind of breathing organism. Its walls sweated, its floors glowed with heat, the air shimmered, alive with moisture and motion. Even when empty, it seemed to hum faintly, like it remembered the people who had passed through. And maybe it did. Stone holds memory. If you've ever touched an old wall, you know the feeling. It's as if the surface itself vibrates faintly with the echo of all the hands that once touched it. As night fell, and the fires under the water-heating furnaces dimmed, bathhouses changed character. The echoes grew softer, more haunting. Attendants moved through the shadows, gathering towels, emptying basins, whispering among themselves. The last few guests lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth. Outside, the world cooled rapidly. Inside, the air still glowed, faintly golden. In that in-between moment, half steam, half silence, time seemed to stop. If you could walk through one of those places after closing, you'd feel it. The hush of a space that had seen too much life to ever be truly still. The scent of wet marble, the faint drip of condensation falling from the ceiling, the ghostly warmth clinging to the stone. It's almost sacred, the way heat lingers after bodies are gone. Like an steam long enough, your sense of time dissolves. You don't count minutes, you measure moments by how deeply you exhale. The body relaxes first, then the mind follows. Thoughts loosen, drift, like bubbles rising and bursting. It's no wonder philosophers and poets loved these places. They were ideal for thinking, or perhaps for not thinking, for letting thoughts wash over you like waves, until clarity arrived uninvited. And maybe that's what the modern world misses most, spaces that allow for that kind of mental drift. We've replaced them with productivity, with noise, with the constant hum of information. But our ancestors, in their marble chambers filled with steam and laughter, understood something fundamental. That rest isn't idleness, it's maintenance. It's what keeps the mind from cracking under the weight of living. The bathhouse was maintenance for the soul, a place where you could be undone and remade. And every drop of water, every curl of steam, was a small act of mercy. Outside, the night deepens, the city quiets, the last bathers leave, stepping back into the cool air, cheeks flushed, hearts lighter. Somewhere, an attendant extinguishes the final lamp, and the shadows close in. But inside the stone, the heat remains faint, persistent, waiting for tomorrow's fire. Because warmth, once created, never really dies. It only hides, waiting for the next soul to find it. When warmth leaves the stone, it travels invisibly, rising through the air, slipping through cracks, disappearing into the cool night. But some part of it always lingers, hidden in the breath of walls, in the memory of space. You can feel it when you step back in the next morning. It greets you like an old friend, still faintly alive, ready to begin again. That's how ancient bathhouses felt at dawn, before the fires were fully rekindled, before the voices returned. They existed in a half-dream state, empty, but full of yesterday's ghosts. The attendants would arrive first, their footsteps echoing softly through the chambers. They carried bundles of wood, pails of water, stacks of clean linen. You could hear the low crackle of the first fire catching in the furnace, the sigh as smoke curled upward through the vents. Slowly, the water began to warm. The marble underfoot grew less cold. The faint scent of oil and ash filled the air. It was a ritual older than memory, the lighting of the bath's heart. And as the first visitors arrived, the quiet transformed into life again. In Rome, that meant the splash of sandals on mosaic floors, the cheerful banter of citizens greeting one another. In Constantinople, it was the rhythmic clang of copper bowls, the musical hum of women chatting as they prepared for their morning wash. Across continents, the script repeated itself, the human desire to begin the day clean, calm, renewed. If you followed that ritual far east, to Japan, you'd find another kind of bathhouse entirely, the onsen, born from the earth itself. There, water wasn't heated by fire, but by volcanoes, bubbling up from deep beneath the ground, rich with minerals that shimmered like liquid stone. The Japanese didn't just bathe, they listened. The sound of the spring was sacred, a song of the planet's breath. Bathing wasn't about washing dirt away, it was about aligning yourself with nature's rhythm, becoming one with the mountain and the mist. Imagine it, an early morning in an ancient village. The mist still clings to the pine trees. A path leads down to a steaming pool surrounded by smooth rocks. You step in slowly, the water almost too hot, then just right. Around you, others do the same. Farmers, monks, travelers, no one speaking loudly, because silence here is part of the respect. The air smells faintly of sulfur and cedar. In the distance, a bird calls, and the sound ripples over the surface. The warmth sinks into your bones until you can't tell where the water ends and you begin. For the Japanese, bathing was an act of harmony. The ofuro, the household bath, wasn't just a daily habit, it was a form of meditation. You washed before entering, so that the water itself could remain pure, because purity was a gift, not a rite. The bath was shared, often by family, sometimes by entire communities, and afterward, people sat together, drinking tea, watching the steam fade from their skin. It wasn't cleanliness they sought, but quiet connection. That idea of bathing as connection rather than isolation echoes across the world. In Finland, the sauna held the same sacred balance. grand, they glittered like jewels, domed ceilings carved with stars, marble floors that glowed from within, fountains murmuring like prayers. Entering one was like walking into a dream of light and heat. You'd be greeted by attendants carrying towels as soft as clouds. They'd guide you through rooms of increasing warmth, tepidarium, caldarium, herorit, until you reached the heart of the building, where the air shimmered like the inside of a breath. There, lying on a heated stone slab, you'd feel your body dissolve, the boundaries between self and space fading until only warmth remained. And just like in Rome, just like in Greece, just like in Japan, there was talk, whispered stories, laughter, secrets passed from one generation to another. Women shared recipes and advice. Men discussed politics and poetry. Children giggled as they poured water from copper bowls. The hammam was the city's heartbeat, both public and deeply personal. It was where life was washed clean and renewed, one day at a time. If you stood beneath the dome and looked up, you'd see tiny holes cut into the ceiling, letting sunlight filter in as narrow beams that danced in the steam. Every beam caught a swirl of mist, turning it into a column of light. It was like standing inside the sky, watching the stars breathe. Those shafts of light weren't decoration, they were memory. They reminded everyone who entered that warmth and light were gifts of the same source. It's remarkable how human beings, across time and place, have always returned to this element, to water, to heat, to the act of cleansing. It doesn't matter if it's a marble bathhouse, a mountain spring, or a wooden sauna. The purpose is the same, to remember that the body and soul are not separate, that to tend one is to heal the other. And perhaps that's what the bathhouse truly represented, not luxury, not status, but belonging. A place where every person, regardless of who they were outside, could sink into warmth and feel human again. There's a softness in that idea, a tenderness that's easy to forget in a world built on hurry. To bathe slowly, to sit in steam and do nothing but exist, is to remember something essential, that being alive doesn't always mean being productive. Sometimes it simply means breathing in, breathing out, and feeling the world touch you back. The ancients didn't have our distractions, no buzzing phones, no glowing screens, but they had noise of their own. Markets, politics, war, ambition. The bathhouse was their silence. It was where they went to return to themselves, to remember their smallness and their strength. And even though the architecture may have changed, that need hasn't. We still seek steam, warmth, quiet. We still crave the feeling of being surrounded, not by noise, but by presence. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the faint echo of water dripping in a distant chamber, the low hum of conversation, the rhythm of human life continuing in warmth. The world outside might have changed 1,000 times, but inside the bathhouse, the story remains the same. The morning continues, sunlight soft through the mist, and someone laughs quietly, a sound that could belong to any century. The bathhouse quieted as night fell outside. The light that filtered through the small glass windows had dimmed to a mellow orange, and the air took on that soft, sleepy calm that always comes after laughter. Most of the workers were cleaning now, sweeping up reeds, draining parts of the hot pools, stacking wooden stools, but not everyone had left. There were always a few who lingered, who found it impossible to leave the warmth. You could spot them sitting half submerged, their skin pink from the heat, eyelids heavy, letting the sound of water lull them toward that liminal state between waking and sleep. The way they reclined, silent and slow-breathing, looked like a painting. One of the attendants was lighting oil lamps around the walls now, each flame catching a flicker on the wet marble. The glow shimmered on the surface of the pools, turning the ripples into liquid fire. The scent of oil mixed with the old familiar Thames of steam and sweat, something oddly comforting, the smell of life winding down. In the far corner, a harpist had taken a seat. The melody he played wasn't formal or loud, just something lazy and drifting, notes bending slightly in the moist air. The Romans loved background sound. Silence to them felt strange. Music filled the spaces where conversation had ended. A wealthy matron named Livia sat nearby, her maid brushing her long hair out beside the tepidarium pool. Every motion was slow, almost ritualistic. She wasn't speaking, just watching the shimmer of her reflection break and reform in the water. For a moment, her face softened, no sternness, no public posture, just tiredness. That was the secret beauty of the baths. Everyone's masks melted in the heat. Senators, merchants, slaves, all equally pink and sleepy. You could imagine the empire pausing for an hour here, the constant push of ambition dissolving into the haze. Across the room, two soldiers who'd served in different legions were trading stories. You could tell by their scars and the way they laughed, that kind of laughter that comes only from shared danger. They were probably bragging, maybe a little exaggerating, but that was fine. In the bathhouse, storytelling was another form of unwinding. Men would recall the wild frontiers, the cold nights by foreign rivers, the battles where the world turned red, and somehow, in this warm chamber, those memories softened. Even horror, retold in steam, became nostalgia. A slave passed by carrying amphorae of cooled wine, watered down as was the Roman custom. He poured for the lingering guests, who drank slowly, savoring not the taste, but the excuse to stay a little longer. Outside, the sky was shifting to violet. The city beyond these walls was still alive, markets closing, torches being lit, the sound of carts fading into night. But here, in the heart of the bathhouse, time was syrup-thick. You could almost forget the outside world existed at all. As the musician changed melodies, a few men began to discuss politics again lightly, lazily, like one might toss a pebble into a pond just to see the ripples. Names of emperors and governors floated in the air, but none of it carried tension. There was no urgency here. That was another function of the baths, to make even politics seem unimportant for a while. A senator could complain about the grain tax while half asleep, and a bricklayer might nod sympathetically. Hierarchy melted, along with the ice of formality. At the same time, some of the attendants began closing off sections for the night. They moved with practiced quietness, sliding wooden screens into place, extinguishing certain lamps. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly. The main pools would stay open until late, though, because Rome didn't sleep early. The city was restless, even when its people tried to relax. They did so communally, noisily, indulgently. You might hear laughter from another chamber, where younger bathers splashed or wrestled for fun, their joy bouncing off the marble. The acoustics made every sound ripple into the next. One young poet, you could tell he was a poet by the faraway look in his eyes, sat on the edge of the caldarium, mumbling lines to himself. He probably came here often, chasing inspiration in the steam. Some said the bathhouse could clear the mind for thinking. Maybe that was true. The Romans valued not just clean bodies but clean minds, though clean for them meant ready to function again. Baths were their daily reset button, like a meditation disguised as luxury. As the harp's final notes faded, a silence settled over the room, not empty, but full of slow breathing, dripping water, and the faint hum of relaxation. This was what the poet loved, the in-between moment when everything feels both ancient and immediate, when life pauses just long enough to remind you that it's good. The bathhouse wasn't just about hygiene, it was about being human together, stripped of armor, status, and noise. Eventually, Livia rose, her maid wrapping her in a linen towel. She walked past the pools without hurry, feet silent on the wet floor, and vanished into the dressing chamber. Others followed. Each departure sent a small wave across the surface of the water, until only a few figures remained. The attendant leaned his broom against the wall and watched, maybe thinking of his own small apartment somewhere in the Subura district, smoky, noisy, crowded. The warmth here wouldn't last forever, but it would linger in the bones for a while, enough to make the cold streets bearable. Outside, the night air hit like a second awakening, crisp and real. The bathers stepped out one by one, hair damp, faces flushed, smelling faintly of oil and salt. They looked softer somehow, like statues that had come alive. For them, the city's clamor didn't sting as much now. They had been, for an hour, part of something older than comfort, a ritual of steam and stone that whispered, "You belong here, in this body, in this world." And as the doors closed behind the last guest, the bathhouse exhaled. The attendants would finish their duties, mop the floors, check the fires for the next morning. The quiet that remained was heavy and sacred. Tomorrow, the same cycles would begin again, the same gossip, the same steam, the same laughter echoing off the same old marble. But for tonight, the ancient bathhouse rested, like the city itself had finally taken a deep, slow breath. By the time dawn brushed its first pale streaks over the tiled roofs of Rome, the bathhouse was already stirring again. Steam rose from the freshly stoked furnaces below, and the faint metallic hiss of the hypercaust system warming up filled the underground corridors. Down there, in the dark belly of the building, slaves were already sweating before sunrise, feeding logs into roaring fires, checking vents, scraping soot from the brick flues that carried heat to the floors above. It was brutal work, done in flickering torchlight, but necessary. The world upstairs, all that calm and comfort, depended on this hidden labor. Up in the main chamber, attendants moved quickly, wiping down marble benches, polishing brass fittings, refilling oil jars. The scent of freshly mixed soap powder, a blend of ash and fat, hung in the air, sharp and earthy. You could hear the rhythmic slosh of buckets as they refilled pools and tested temperatures by hand. Everything had to be just right before the first customers arrived. In Rome, luxury wasn't optional. It was expected. And then they began to arrive, one by one, the early risers of the city. Bakers came first, their arms dusted with flour, faces already flushed from the night's ovens. Then a few merchants, yawning and muttering about ship arrivals at Ostia. The bathhouse was their meeting room, their gossip den, their morning news scroll. They paid their entrance fee, a small coin, cheaper than a cup of wine, and vanished into the steam like ghosts. One man, an elderly scholar with ink stains still on his fingers, was already lecturing his friend about the writings of Seneca before his sandals were even off. Cleanliness of the soul, he said, is like cleansing the skin daily, or filth returns. His friend nodded politely, clearly only half listening. That was another unwritten rule of the bathhouse. Everyone came for their own reason. Some for health, some for friendship, some for the quiet pleasure of floating. By mid-morning, the place was alive again. Voices echoed from every corner, laughter, arguments, the splash of water. The hot air shimmered, full of life. Attendants hurried back and forth, carrying towels and strigils, their arms gleaming with oil. You could feel the rhythm of the city itself pulsing here, in this shared heartbeat of steam and chatter. At one side of the room, a young couple whispered to each other, half hidden by the fog. The woman's laughter was soft, the kind that curls around your ear and stays there. Bathhouses weren't only for the body, they were for everything that made being alive feel good. The Romans knew that pleasure wasn't shameful, it was part of health. A relaxed mind meant a better citizen, or at least, that's what they told themselves as they soaked and flirted in the scented pools. A physician sat nearby, watching people's skin tones, their posture, their breathing. He'd probably write a treatise later about the effects of heat on the human humors, too much fire, too much bile, that sort of thing. Roman doctors were half philosophers, half guessers still. They understood the value of these places. Baths weren't just indulgence, they were medicine. The heat loosened muscles, opened pores, softened the hard edges of daily struggle. Even the poorest citizen could afford an hour of relief, and that mattered. But beneath all the comfort, the bathhouse also carried stories, invisible layers of time. The marble slabs underfoot had absorbed centuries of footsteps, of laughter, of whispered secrets. You could almost feel it, if you stood still enough. The ghosts of people who'd come here before, now long forgotten, but still lingering in the mist. That was the strange intimacy of ancient spaces. They remembered what humans forgot. In one of the smaller side rooms, a group of women gathered, chatting about last night's dinner parties. The tone was light, but the subtext sharp. Who wore what, who arrived late, who was sick again. The bathhouse was where Roman gossip reached its highest art form. Here, rumors spread faster than perfume. The walls probably heard more confessions than any temple ever did. One of the attendants, a girl not older than 16, listened as she worked, keeping her face neutral. She knew better than to repeat anything she overheard. In a place like this, information was currency, sometimes even more valuable than gold. She'd seen patrons exchange favors, strike deals, and settle feuds, all while pretending to discuss hairstyles. The Romans might have invented plumbing, but they also perfected subtlety. Meanwhile, out in the frigidarium, the cold pool glittered under the skylight. Brave souls dipped themselves in with a gasp, their bodies shocked awake. A chorus of "By the Gods" echoed around the stone walls. The transition from hot to cold was part of the ritual, a reset button for the senses. Some did it for health, others for pride. One old man claimed he'd never caught a fever in his life thanks to his daily plunge. Whether or not that was true, it made a good story. By noon, sunlight was pouring through the open roof panels, catching on droplets of steam like tiny diamonds. The air shimmered with heat and human breath. The musician had returned, playing a soft melody on the flute now, its notes curling like smoke through the air. You could hear bits of conversation float past, talk of politics, of love, of trade routes, of gladiator matches. It was the entire empire condensed into one echoing room. The scholar from earlier finally relaxed, letting his mind drift. Around him, the sounds blurred into one warm hum. For a moment, time didn't feel linear anymore. You could imagine generations overlapping here, emperors and slaves, poets and merchants, all sharing the same simple joy of water, warmth, and community. It was strange to think that, centuries later, ruins of this world would lie silent, and tourists would whisper among broken columns, trying to imagine what it sounded like when Rome breathed. The scholar opened his eyes, looked around at the living city within these walls, and smiled faintly. Maybe, he thought, this was the true legacy of Rome, not wars or monuments, but this, the art of gathering, of cleansing, of being human together. He closed his eyes again, listening to the water, and let himself drift. As we wandered deeper into the steamy corridors of the ancient bathhouse, the air begins to thicken with warmth and whispers alike. You see, by now, the bathhouse isn't just a place for washing. It's become a stage for social performance, where every splash and sigh might carry a story. Imagine yourself sitting on a smooth, slightly worn stone bench, the faint smell of herbs and oils swirling in the humid air. You dip your hand into the warm pool, feeling the gentle ripples dance across your fingers, and in the distance, someone murmurs a conversation that's far too interesting to ignore. Bathhouses were strangely egalitarian for their time. Wealthy merchants, working-class artisans, even travelers passing through the city all mingled here. The water was a great equalizer. Everyone, from the fussy senator to the sweaty laborer, removed the trappings of status with their tunics and sandals, leaving only bare skin and exposed stories. And stories were currency. Here gossip flowed as freely as the water, sometimes more freely. You might hear whispers about who got a new villa, who argued with whom in the forum, or which senator had a scandalous secret. Bathhouses were a mirror of society, reflecting not just hygiene habits but also social hierarchies, ambitions, and jealousies. You lean back against the warm stone wall, letting the heat seep into your muscles, and you notice a small group nearby. They're engaged in a debate about the latest play performed at the amphitheater. One man gestures dramatically, convinced that the playwright's latest work is a masterpiece, while a woman with a sly smile teases that he only says that because he wants to impress a neighbor. Laughter ripples across the pool like gentle waves, mixing with the soft echo of water dripping from vaulted ceilings. And you can't help but notice, even though everyone seems so relaxed, there's an unspoken etiquette here. You have to listen, but not intrude. Comment, but not dominate. Laugh, but not offend. The bathhouse is a theater, and everyone is playing their part, sometimes consciously, often instinctively. The baths themselves were more than a simple pool. The Romans had mastered a sequence of rooms designed to enhance both body and mind. There was the frigidarium, a chilly plunge for those brave enough to shock their system. The tepidarium, a comfortably warm space to relax and prepare for the heat. And the caldarium, the steaming hot room where the sweat would flow and tensions would melt away. And then there were side chambers filled with scented oils, sponges, and even musical instruments for those who wanted to elevate their experience. It wasn't just hygiene, it was a ritual. You could almost sense the care and precision in how each room was designed to nurture the body, calm the mind, and, incidentally, stirred just the right amount of intrigue among its guests. And speaking of intrigue, one cannot underestimate the subtle power of touch in these spaces. A light pat on the back while reaching for a sponge could signal friendship or flirtation. A casual brush against someone's arm might spark curiosity or resentment. These bathhouse interactions were a delicate dance, choreographed by centuries of social custom, unspoken rules, and the ever-present steam that blurred faces and intentions alike. You can see why poets and playwrights loved the bathhouse. It's a perfect metaphor for life itself, where warmth, tension, secrecy, and revelation all coexist in a single, intimate environment. Even the architecture played a role in this social theater. High vaulted ceilings allowed for echoes, making conversations carry softly but deliberately across distances. Mosaic floors, often adorned with playful or mythological images, invited both contemplation and conversation. Fountains and water channels didn't just circulate water, they created a soundtrack of trickling notes, punctuating laughter and murmurs with gentle rhythmic music. You notice a small group admiring a mosaic of Neptune, and one child points out the mischievous dolphins. The adults chuckle, and for a moment, everyone's age, status, or worries melt into a shared, timeless delight. By now, you might be wondering about the attendants, those invisible orchestrators of bathhouse harmony. They're everywhere and nowhere, quietly ensuring the rooms stay warm, the water clean, and the oils replenished. Some of them also listened, learned, and carried the bathhouse's news to the wider city, serving as conduits of information in an age without newspapers or instant messages. They were the lifeblood of the bathhouse, invisible yet indispensable, ensuring that the delicate equilibrium of leisure, cleanliness, and gossip remained intact. Now imagine stepping out of the caldarium, your skin glistening and your muscles pleasantly heavy with warmth. You pass by the stridular curved tool for scraping oil, sweat, and grime from the body, and watch as someone expertly removes the residue from another guest's back. The movement is practiced, almost ceremonial, and yet there's an intimacy to it that feels both public and private. Everyone here is part of the performance, but each interaction carries a spark of personal attention, a fleeting moment of connection amidst the flowing water and murmuring voices. As the day draws on, the bathhouse slowly shifts its energy. Morning chatter gives way to the quieter, reflective hum of afternoon relaxation. Some visitors drift off into half-sleep in the warm tepidarium, while others engage in whispered games of wit and wordplay, teasing, challenging, or sharing a carefully chosen anecdote. And all the while, the architecture, the water, the heat, and the lingering aromas work together to create a sensory cocoon, inviting everyone to linger just a bit longer, to savor the unique mixture of cleanliness and connection. And just as the bathhouse has always done, it teaches a subtle truth: hygiene and social life are inseparable. The Romans understood that washing wasn't merely a private act, it was a public performance, a ritual of belonging, a stage for human interaction in all its glory, folly, and humor. And as you finally towel off, feeling the last warmth of the stones beneath your feet, you carry with you the echoes of laughter, the soft ripple of water, and the timeless lesson that even in the most intimate moments, life's stories are meant to be shared. As we step toward the exit of the bathhouse, the sun has begun its slow descent, casting long golden streaks across the polished stone floors. The air, still warm but tinged with the coolness of early evening, carries the soft murmur of the remaining visitors. There's a kind of contentment here, a quiet satisfaction in muscles relaxed, skin refreshed, and minds quietly entertained by the day's small dramas. And as you pause to look back, the bathhouse seems to shimmer with memory. Each tile, each ripple in the water, every whispered conversation, now part of its enduring story. It's easy to forget how central bathhouses were to Roman life. They were more than amenities, they were hubs of health, leisure, and society, places where city dwellers connected across class lines, discussed politics, traded news, and even engaged in the subtle dance of flirtation and intrigue. You might imagine senators and merchants debating policy, soldiers recounting their latest campaigns, and artisans teasing one another about gossip from the market, all under the watchful gaze of mosaics and statues, all enveloped in warmth, steam, and the gentle cadence of flowing water. As you step into the cooler evening air, the contrast is sharp but welcome. The sun glints off the water in the outdoor fountains, the streets begin to fill with the sounds of vendors packing up, and the scent of food from nearby taverns drifts lazily through the air. And while the bathhouse doors close behind you, its influence lingers. Every step home carries the memory of warmth, laughter, and the subtle social lessons embedded in its architecture and ritual. The simple act of bathing has transformed into a meditation on human connection, observation, and the rhythms of daily life. And isn't it fascinating to think that something as ordinary as washing could hold so much significance? Here, in these ancient walls, we see reflected the complexity of Roman society, the blending of practical necessity with social performance, the intertwining of hygiene and hierarchy, the mingling of relaxation and revelation. Each visitor, each conversation, Each ripple in the water contributes to a living tapestry, a moment of humanity preserved in time. Perhaps most importantly, the bathhouse reminds us that community often emerges in unexpected places. It's not only the grand forums or the bustling marketplaces that define a city, but also these quieter, more intimate spaces where people come together in shared experience. In the bathhouse, equality is fleeting but real. Intimacy is public yet respectful, and every splash or sigh carries a story, small but meaningful, echoing across the stones and into memory. So as you finally leave, the sound of your footsteps mingling with the fading murmur of conversation, take a moment to imagine the countless others who have walked these same paths, felt the same warmth, and shared the same laughter. And in that reflection, you find a timeless connection, a gentle reminder that while centuries may separate us from these ancient bathers, the simple human desire for cleanliness, comfort, and connection remains unchanged. And as night falls and the city quiets, the bathhouse stands silently, ready to welcome another day, another visitor, another story. It is a place where water meets wisdom, warmth meets wit, and cleanliness meets gossiper, reminder that even in the simplest acts, life unfolds in rich, intricate, and sometimes delightfully unexpected ways. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, perhaps imagine yourself walking once more through the arches of that ancient bathhouse, the scent of oils in the air, the gentle warmth on your skin, and the soft, ever-present hum of stories being told, shared, and remembered. And with that, let the echoes of laughter, conversation, and flowing water carry you gently into your dreams.